The edge of everything. I never thought life bring me to this point. Standing on the edge of desperation, clinging to the last shreds of dignity I had left. Just a few months ago, everything seemed stable. I had a job, a home, a marriage that, while not perfect, felt secure. But now, everything was slipping away like sand through my fingers. Bills piled up faster than I could keep track of. My bank account was a cruel joke, displaying numbers that only confirmed my helplessness. Job applications went unanswered. Rejection emails filled my inbox, and every lead I chased turned into another dead end. It was bad. A fraying thread. I tried to hide my frustration from Ethan, my husband, but the tension between us was already unbearable. He wasn't the same man I had married 5 years ago. Back then, he'd hold me after a rough day, tell me everything would be okay. But lately, he barely looked at me. His words were cold, distant, like I had become just another problem in his already stressful life. When I told him about another failed job interview, he barely reacted. "I'm doing the best I can," I had said, my voice shaking. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "We can't live on trying, Chloe. The bills don't wait." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Like he had already given up on me. Unless the landlord's offer. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like a failure. The rent was overdue. The landlord had already given us a warning. We had days left before eviction became a real threat. I thought about calling my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to. The shame of admitting I had failed was too much. The next morning, after Ethan left for work without so much as a goodbye, I made my decision. I had to talk to Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance was an intimidating presence. Tall, broad-shouldered, and always impeccably dressed. He carried himself with quiet authority. He owned several properties in the area, and from the way he handled things, it was clear he had money and power. I had barely spoken to him before, aside from the usual tenant-landlord conversations. I knocked on his office door, my hands trembling. When he opened it, his dark eyes studied me carefully, like he already knew why I was there. "Chloe," he said smoothly, leaning against the door frame. "I was wondering when you'd come." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I forced a small smile. I need more time to get the rent together. I lost my job and things have been—" "I know," he interrupted. "I keep track of my tenants. You've been struggling for a while." Shame burned through me. I hated that he had noticed. "Look," I swallowed hard. "If I could just get an extension, I promise I'll—" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Chloe, landlords don't survive on promises." I felt the lump in my throat grow. I had nothing else to offer. "I can't give you more time," he continued, "but I can offer you something else." His gaze lingered on me in a way that made my stomach twist. I knew where this was going before he even said it. "You're a beautiful woman," he said casually, like he was discussing the weather, "and I believe in fair exchanges." My body went rigid. I stepped back instinctively, my mind racing. The word stuck in my throat. "There's no pressure," he said, raising his hands in mock innocence. "You need help. I can provide it. No strings attached." "No strings attached?" As if that made it better. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding. The moment I was outside, I felt like I could breathe again. But the weight of his offer followed me home. The growing chasm. Ethan came home late that night. I had waited up for him, hoping for some kind of reassurance, some indication that he still cared. But when he walked in, he barely acknowledged me. "You're late," I said softly. "Work ran over," he muttered, loosening his tie. I wanted to believe him, but something in his voice felt off. "Ethan, are we okay?" My voice was barely above a whisper. He looked at me, then really looked at me for the first time in weeks, but instead of the warmth I was searching for, all I saw was exhaustion. "We're fine, Chloe," he said, but it sounded like a lie. I nodded, but my chest felt hollow. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Vance's offer, about how easy it would be to say yes. Just once, just to get through this mess. But the thought made me sick. I told myself I would find another way. I had to. I tried to push the conversation with Mr. Vance out of my mind, but it lingered like a shadow creeping into every thought. The worst part was how tempting it had sounded in that fleeting moment of desperation. The logical part of me screamed that it was wrong. But another part, the one drowning in financial ruin, kept whispering, "What choice do you have?" Breaking point. Days passed and things only got worse. I scrolled through endless job listings, sending out applications, but nothing came back. I sold old clothes, jewelry, anything I could spare. But it barely covered groceries, let alone rent. Ethan barely spoke to me anymore. He came home late, always exhausted, always distant. Some nights, he didn't come home at all. I started noticing little things. His phone always on silent, the way he avoided my touch, the lingering smell of perfume that wasn't mine. I told myself I was being paranoid, that stress was making me see things that weren't there. But deep down, I knew something between us had already broken. The eviction notice came 3 days later. Final warning, no more extensions. My stomach twisted as I read the paper, my hand shaking so hard I could barely hold it. I thought about calling Ethan, but what was the point? He hadn't cared before, and he wouldn't care now. That night, as I sat alone in our dark apartment, reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. I had no money, no job, no help. I had begged, fought, done everything I could, but nothing had worked. And then, like a cruel echo, Mr. Vance's words came back to me. Fair exchanges, no strings attached. The call. I stared at my phone, my fingers hovering over his number. A sickening weight settled in my chest as I wrestled with myself. I had spent my whole life believing I would never compromise my morals, that I would never let myself be put in a position like this. But I had also never been this desperate. Hit call. The phone barely rang before he answered. His voice smooth, knowing. "Chloe, I was expecting you." Shame burned through me, but I swallowed it down. "I need help, Mr. Vance." Then I knew. The arrangement was set. No need for details, just an understanding. My hands shook as I ended the call. My heart pounded, so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I sat in silence for a long time, trying to convince myself I could go through with it. I told myself it was just one time, just to get through this, just to survive. But deep down I knew the truth. There was no such thing as just once. Unveiled truths. The guilt started before it even happened. I could feel it poisoning me, wrapping around my thoughts like a noose. I told myself not to think about Ethan, not to think about what I was about to do. I had been faithful to him for 5 years, but had he been faithful to me? I wanted to believe he had, but the doubts were louder than my denial. When I met Mr. Vance again, I felt like I was walking towards something I could never come back from. His presence was overwhelming, his confidence unshaken. He didn't ask if I was sure. He already knew the answer. The moment it was over, I felt sick. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. My body didn't feel like mine anymore. Like I had traded a piece of myself for something temporary, something that wouldn't matter in the long run. But I also felt relief. The rent was covered. The eviction was no longer a threat. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning. I told myself it was over, that I would never do it again, that I could go back to my life as if nothing had happened. But I was wrong, because the moment I walked back into my apartment, Ethan was waiting for me. And the look in his eyes told me that he knew something had changed. The reckoning. Ethan's eyes lingered on me longer than usual, studying me in a way he hadn't in months. There was something different in his gaze, not the usual exhaustion or disinterest, but suspicion. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me as I moved around the apartment, pretending everything was normal, but I could feel it. The shift between us, the weight of what I had done sat heavy in the air. And even though he had no proof, something in him sensed it. I kept my distance, afraid that if I stood too close, he would see the guilt written all over my face. But he was quiet that night, quieter than usual. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured. "Where were you today?" My stomach twisted. "I was out." He nodded slowly, his fingers tapping against the table. "Out where?" He hesitated. That was enough for him. He didn't push, but the damage was done. The next few days were unbearable. He was colder, more distant. I thought I had been hiding my guilt well, but the tension between us grew thick, suffocating. He stopped asking questions, but I could feel them hanging in the air every time he looked at me. I tried to remind myself that he had been distant first, that I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. The perfume, the late nights, the way he had checked out of our marriage long before I had made my decision. But knowing that didn't erase the guilt clawing at my insides. And then I found the message. It wasn't even hidden. His phone was left on the counter, screen lit up with a notification that he hadn't bothered to clear. A name I didn't recognize. A message I wish I had never seen. "Last night was amazing. When can I see you again?" My chest tightened. The words blurred as I tried to process them. Everything inside me screamed that this was a mistake, that there had to be another explanation. But I knew better. I had known for a while. I set the phone down carefully, like touching it too hard would make the reality worse. I waited for the anger to come, for the betrayal to hit me in full force. But all I felt was numb. When Ethan walked in that night, I didn't confront him right away. I wanted him to say something first, to at least pretend like he wasn't lying to my face every time he told me he was working late. But he didn't. He barely looked at me, so I spoke first. "Who is she?" He froze. His expression didn't change, but the way his body stiffened told me everything. He didn't even ask what I was talking about. He just knew. "Chloe, don't lie to me." I cut him off. "Not now." He sighed, running a hand over his face like he was already exhausted by the conversation. "It's not what you think." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It never is it?" Silence stretched between us. Finally, he exhaled. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did. The words cut deep. But what hurt more was how calm he was. Like he had already accepted it. Like he wasn't even sorry. "How long?" My voice was barely above a whisper. He hesitated. That was enough of an answer. I felt something break inside me. The last thread holding me together snapped, and suddenly I couldn't keep the truth in anymore. "Me too," I said. His head snapped up. For the first time in months, I had his full attention. "What?" I forced myself to meet his eyes. Even as my heart pounded, I did it too. Shock flickered across his face, quickly replaced by something darker. "With who?" I swallowed hard. "Mr. Vance." The silence that followed was suffocating. His expression twisted into something unreadable, a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You're joking," he said. But he already knew I wasn't. I shook my head. I was desperate. We were about to be evicted. I didn't know what else to do. His laugh was sharp, bitter. "So that makes it okay?" I clenched my fists. "You think what you did is any better?" He stepped closer, eyes burning into mine. At least I didn't sell myself. The words hit harder than a slap. My breath caught, but I refused to look away. "At least I did it to survive." I shot back. "What's your excuse?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, staring at each other, both of us realizing at the same time that there was nothing left to fight for. Whatever love we had, whatever trust we had built, it was gone. Ethan shook his head, stepping back. "I can't do this." I knew what was coming before he even said it. "I'm leaving." I didn't try to stop him. I didn't cry. I just nodded, because deep down, I had already known this was how it would end. As he packed a bag and walked out the door, I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space he left behind. I had wanted so badly to believe that what I did wouldn't change anything, that I could fix it, that we could move past it. But the truth was, we had both been broken long before this. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Ethan was gone, and for the first time in years, I was truly alone. No more waiting for him to come home. No more pretending things were fine. Just me and the consequences of my choices, reclaiming dignity on Rise and Thrives. I had spent so much time justifying what I did, convincing myself it was survival, that I had no other option. But sitting there, staring at the empty space where Ethan's things used to be, the truth was inescapable. I had betrayed myself long before I betrayed him. Survival wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about holding on to who I was even in the darkest moments. And I had let that slip away, piece by piece, convincing myself it was the only way forward. I thought back to the first time I had felt things falling apart. When Ethan started pulling away, when the weight of our struggles became too much, I had blamed him, resented him for not being the man he used to be. But had I really been the same woman he married? Or had I changed too? In ways I didn't even realize? The past few months had turned me into someone I barely recognized. A woman who had lost hope, who had given up on herself. A woman who made choices out of desperation instead of strength. I needed to find my way back. The first thing I did was call Mr. Vance. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice when he answered, like he already knew why I was calling, but I cut him off before he could say anything. "It's over," I said firmly. "Mr. Vance," a slow chuckle. "You got what you needed and now you're done." I swallowed the shame burning in my throat. "I made a mistake. I won't make it again." He sighed as if mildly disappointed. "Your choice." I hung up before he could say anything else. It wasn't just about him. It was about taking control of my life again, about no longer being a victim of my own bad decisions. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding, not just financially, but emotionally. I took whatever jobs I could find, waitressing, freelancing, anything to stay afloat. It wasn't easy. Some days it felt impossible, but every dollar I earned on my own, every small step forward, felt like a piece of myself coming back. Ethan didn't call. He didn't text. And I didn't reach out either. I had spent so long trying to hold on to something that was already broken. But now I understood. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let go. One evening, after a long shift, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in months. I didn't see the desperate woman who had once made a choice she couldn't take back. I saw someone stronger, someone who had been through hell and was still standing. The past couldn't be erased, but it didn't have to define me. I had learned the hard way that desperation makes people do things they never thought they would. That betrayal isn't always black and white, that sometimes the worst choices come from a place of pain, not malice. But I had also learned that redemption is possible. Not through apologies, not through regrets, but through change. I wasn't that woman anymore, and I never would be again. This journey of rebuilding myself is what I want to share with you, right here on Rise and Thrives.